Misery by Stephen King. After writer Paul Sheldon, James Caan, actor, has a serious car crash, he is rescued by a nurse, Annie Wilkes, Kathy Bates actress, who says he is her biggest fan. She is his biggest fan. I have a terrible cold and I can't talk, so you'll have to excuse me. Annie takes him to her rural cabin to get better, where she begins to obsess and becomes cruel and uncontrollable when she finds out Sheldon is killing her favorite character. Sheldon is devising plans for escape. Annie gets more controlling, violent. She forces the writer to write to fit her maniac fantasies. Linguistic. The plot of the movie was incredibly creative and attention-grabbing. Everything they say to one another usually has an underlying meaning. Grammar. The characters use correct grammar by the author, but then the villain would sometimes speak incorrectly to show the difference in intelligence. Syntax. Management arrangement for the thriller that, along with the numerous personalities that are portrayed, use gestures of all sorts to enhance the scenes. The objectives of this book and movie are to create a lifelike situation that keeps you in suspense, wondering what is going to happen next. It appears Annie is an angel when she rescues Paul, but when he finds that she has had her own intentions for him and his book, he is captive in her home. No one was looking for Paul, as he was making this trip to do some writing in private, so Annie had plenty of time to control his writings. Paul just wanted to complete his final book, which Misery Chastain dies and he retires. But Annie is radical about Misery. She won't let Paul write her death, and this is the controversy between them. I was in suspense from the car crash and to the raging battle at the end. Communication was used in every aspect in this movie, and a great job as well. In this scene, Paul Sheldon, James Caan, the actor, is recovering and able to get out of bed and walk, sit up, and type. He has confiscated a hairpin that he is using for a key to get out of his room to go downstairs and explore a way to get help whenever Annie is away. Annie, Kathy Bates, finds something moved that she had in a position. She goes to confront Paul and explains that she knows he's been out of his room because of the jar being out of her place. She shows him his hairpin after he is looking for it and told him that he had been punished. He had to be punished for his actions. She describes an old form of discipline and begins by placing a large block of wood between his ankle and raises a sledgehammer. While Paul is screaming in pain, she hits each foot inward as hard as she can, crushing his ankle bones. She explains they called this hobbling in the old times. Paul cries out in severe pain until he passes out from shock. Annie proclaims her love for him. She then carefully manipulates his feet in a correct position and constructed casts on each leg for healing. When Paul finally awakes, Annie tells him that she had to do it for the book, but she is infatuated with Paul. He cannot leave before the book that Paul is writing is complete. Paul must start over with recuperation refined to his bed. The level of speaking on a scale of 1 to 10 from specific to general, Annie and Paul both were being manipulating and careful how they addressed the subject of escape and torture. I would guess the level to be approximately 3, meaning very specific in the fact that Paul is going to be punished for going against Annie's rules. They were being specific about escape and torture. Communication barriers are dominated by Annie as she has Paul captive. They have definite cultural difference, gender differences, status differences, and physical separations because Annie is choosing to overpower the conversations. Her mental capacity is all an internal barrier as well as the rule area with little outside communication. The room being locked at all times shows distrust for Paul. His fear of Annie immensely controls him. I think Annie would be the obvious choice for who is to counsel about her mental state. Recommend talking to a professional to help her overcome her obsession with Paul's book. Explain that Paul has his own life in the city and is valuable to all his readers. Be compassionate for them, too, in controlling Paul's writings. Paul is from the city, a celebrity well known by his readers, educated and mentally stable. However, Annie is from a rural and desolate area. She is not a celebrity, probably uneducated, and mentally unstable. Paul would be comfortable in most surroundings, from large crowds to the privacy of his own home, when he writes. He's intelligent and with the good people from all cultures. Annie is likely to be introverted and withdrawn with only a small amount of contact. She probably has a hard time communicating with other cultures due to her discomfort. She is obviously mentally ill, which would play a role in all interactions. It was chosen by the character Annie because she controlled every aspect of the situation and what Paul could do. Dominant culture is used by Annie to control Paul to do as she wishes. When we communicate, we bring our culture backgrounds into those encounters. Soul, 2011. Paul is a more diverse culture as he is being around people of all types and a celebrity to readers. He can relate with all cultures. Obviously, there is a tremendous difference in norms for the two as they live totally different lives beyond this experience. Paul is typing when Annie rushes in. That is, he totally rewrites the scene that she was holding and slams down on desk. She says, "It's not worthy of you." Bates, 1990. Annie explains, when she went to the movies for chapter plays, Paul says, "cliffhangers." Annie gets excited and says, "I know that, Mr. Man. They also call them serials. I'm not stupid, you know." Bates, 1990. Annie goes on to tell how her favorite movie didn't end as she would expect and felt cheated angrily, saying, "This is not right. He didn't get out of the cockle-doodle car." Bates, 1990. Paul says, "They always cheated like that in chapter plays." Kahn, 1990. But Annie tells him, not him. He had to rewrite it to please her. Paul is giving a look of dismay and defeat. When Annie storms into the room, it is obvious she is upset. As she explains why the scene is all wrong, Paul tries to appease her by being compassionate. Annie states facts and that she is not stupid to show Paul she is knowledgeable of writing. Annie gets excited about the way the car crash is written and exclaims it's wrong with slang. Paul tries to console Annie by telling her it's normal in writing. Annie won't accept it from him, though. Scene 2. In this scene, the movie begins with Paul Sheldon, James Caan, typing a book. He has a cigarette and a match lying out and a champagne chilling. He doesn't speak but completes his manuscript, writing the end. He smokes his cigarette, pours a glass of champagne. Paul is writing with a feeling of completion and accomplishment. He then takes a glass of champagne to celebrate. Then he takes a deep breath, as if for relief it is complete. Scene 3. Annie just walks into the room, lays down Paul's pills, and has an unkempt appearance and a look of depression. Paul inquires, Annie, what's wrong? Caan, 1990. Annie says, the rain, sometimes it makes me blue. Bates, 1990. Annie goes to explain that she is in love with him and says he'll never understand what it's like for a girl like her to lose a love like him. Paul, compassionately but afraid of the answer, asks, why would you lose me? Caan, 1990. Annie says the book is almost done, his legs are getting better, and soon he will want to leave. Annie pulls a gun from her pocket and says she thinks about using it. She says, I better go now. I might put bullets in it. Bates, 1990. Paul is left in a state of worry. The sad and poor appearance of Annie when she entered the room lets you know she is feeling depressed and unsocial. Then she explains about the rain. Annie's confession to Paul that she loves him makes him try to convince her he understands and likes it with her. He is playing on her emotions. When Annie explains what Paul's stay is almost complete, she reveals a gun from her pocket. It scares Paul, but he doesn't say anything. Annie claims she thinks about using it. Paul is confused. Annie goes outside in the rain. Scene 1. In this scene, Annie demands Paul burn his book, as it does not please her. She gives him the matches and says she thinks she should do it. He should do it. The whole time she is pouring lighter fluid all over Paul's legs to threaten him, and he knows she will do it, so he lights the match and throws it on the grill where the book is causing a large blaze. Annie frantically works to put the fire out. Looking at the burnt pages, she says with satisfaction, what a mess. Annie feels her expectations for the book are much better than the original way Paul had written it. Paul is saddened and angry inside over his long accomplishment being ruined. He and Annie will never have a good relationship because their meeting is based on deceit and infatuation, besides the fact that Annie is mentally unstable. Scene 2. Annie is excitedly helping Paul, which has recovered enough to get into a wheelchair and move about the room. Paul sarcastically replies to her excitement by saying he is thrilled to see this side of the room. Annie brought paper and supplies to Paul to use to write a new book with Annie's favorite character, Misery, will be brought back to life. Since Annie made Paul burn his original transcript, he can write a new one. Annie exclaims that he will dedicate the book to her for nursing him back to health. She says, you're going to make me the envy of the world. Paul tries to explain it